My wife and I were married for 2 years before the unexpected happened. June and I first met at a business conference we attended. She sat in front of me, and that was how I noticed she was one of my mutual Facebook friends, and we had never spoken to each other before. She was just one of those girls I would stumble on her cute pictures and valuable business content. June was famous on Facebook, and she had many followers mainly because of the helpful tips and other life-related content she shared. I wasn't expecting to see her at that conference, especially since it was in another state. Still, I was happy to finally meet her in person and thank her for all the information she had been sharing with us for free. So, I waited after the conference to introduce myself and we clicked immediately. She was easy to talk to, and talking to her felt great. Although she didn't recognize me at first, I wasn't expecting her to, but she looked me up on Facebook and confirmed we were mutual friends. I thought that would be the last time June and I would speak to or see each other. She was one of those witty, classy girls, and I was just a regular guy with a monotonous lifestyle and work pattern. Later that evening, I was at home watching my favorite show when I received a message from her. I was so thrilled and excited that I responded as soon as I got it, and from that first message, many more followed. We did not talk about ourselves. There were random things we learned at the meeting. After that day, we spoke occasionally until one evening. I posted something on Facebook that required people to share their opinions, and she sent me a message. That message changed many things for us because from there, we became closer friends than mere Facebook friends. I worked for a fast-growing tech company and I earned well. Being the business and career-driven woman she was, she worked with a real estate company. She was one of their best employees because she could get big clients and sell properties worth a lot. I won't lie, I liked her from the first time I saw her at the meeting, but I didn't think she would like someone like me, especially since I believed I was not as bright as she was. Eventually, we started going out for lunch and dinner or would stroll or drive around the city. Our friendship grew fast, and I liked how it was going. Aside from being witty, June was gorgeous. She was average height, perfect for me, and she checked out every point on my girlfriend's material list. Even before I asked her out, I was spoiling her with things. I bought her chocolates, gifts, flowers, and the little things that could make a woman happy. After we had gained each other's trust and love, I popped the question down the line, and she said yes. That was one of my happy moments. I even promised to get her a good life. She didn't move in with me, but we visited each other a lot, and if she wanted, she could spend the weekend at my place. After she said yes to me, one of the things I did was change our relationship status on Facebook so people could know we were together. I also posted her pictures a lot or would share any of her content I liked. She barely posted my pictures, except it was my birthday, but the love-struck puppy in me didn't let me ask questions about that. Because I loved her, I did literally everything for her. I supported her emotionally, financially, and whatever she needed. Every month, I would outdo myself and get her something better than the last gift I gave her. I took her shopping, bought her the things she loved, and spent quality time with her. I loved June so much and could not stop thinking about her even as we dated. I wanted her to be in my life forever, and I knew it would be good for our kids if I married her. I read somewhere that kids inherited their smartness from their mothers, and for me, June was the perfect mother for my kids. I won't say I didn't benefit from her too. I did, and her influence alone in my life pushed me to be a better person and take life more seriously. We dated for a year and some months, and when I was tired of dating, we married each other. Initially, being married to June was more fun than I thought. We were so happy, and we did almost everything together. June was affirmative, so she always reminded me that she loved me. She said it in the morning, during the day, and even before she went to bed, and it made me feel great. We weren't kids lovers, so we didn't talk about children until we felt ready. June was a hard worker, and if there was anyone who could convince you to do something you didn't want to do, it was June. She was very good at persuasion, and I learned that from her. The first year of our marriage was full of fun. Our intimacy life was hot. We loved getting intimate and didn't mind doing it many times a week. As time passed, I no longer had to go to the office and started working from home. This was a year after Corona happened, and working from home became allowed in my organization. I don't know why, but my friends believed June, and I would not last. They said we were two different people and didn't think June would settle with a man like me. It hurt to hear that from my close friends, but I believed they were jealous that I ended up with someone as famous and intelligent as June. I really wanted to prove them wrong, but sadly they were right. One day, June came home and told me about a big client her company had assigned her to. The man was super rich and she was going to sell him a big property, but it would take time because he required a lot of follow-ups, traveling to meet with him and all. I didn't have an issue with that because it was her work. I was very happy for her because I knew the kind of raise she would get from a client like that, and I even encouraged her to do her best. A few weeks after June told me about this client, I noticed many changes in our marriage. She was always on her phone and could stay on a call for hours. I knew part of it was business because I could hear her conversations, but I didn't like how distant we had become. She also traveled a lot and barely spent time with me. If the weekend came, she would dress up early in the morning, and the next time I'd see her would be at night. This continued for weeks, and when I confronted her about it, asking her to make time for me, she said I was being insensitive. She said she never interrupted me when I worked on my projects, so I had no right to ask her to cut down on her work. It was our first big argument. She went days without talking to me. Around the same time, our intimacy life was non-existent. She barely allowed me to touch her, and we moved from doing it multiple times a week to nothing at all. She was always busy, tired, or not in the mood. I know I was the one who encouraged her to close a deal with her client, but I ended up regretting it. At one point, I was forced to look up her client on Facebook, and I found out he was as popular as she was. I even saw some of her long comments on his posts, and one of them included, "Thank you for dinner the other night." It struck a chord, because aside from being extremely busy, I didn't remember the last time June ate at home or cooked something. Whenever I called her to ask if I should make dinner for two, she told me she had already eaten. I could tell that there was something off with her and her new client because she had worked with other big clients in the past, and it was never like that. She didn't spend the entire evening talking to them on the phone or depriving me of her wifely duties. I didn't want to check her phone so she wouldn't know I suspected something. Instead, I hired a private investigator to follow her. A few days later, I got the news that broke my heart. June was having an affair with her big client, and I was devastated. Although I wanted it to be false, all the signs pointed to that. So much had changed about her, even how she talked to me, and I knew something was wrong. After I found out, she came home that evening and continued her cold attitude toward me. She noticed I was also cold, but she didn't bother to ask what was wrong. She didn't know the private investigator was still tailing her, and I planned to expose her. 2 days later, my PI followed them to a motel, and he told me to come to the location immediately after they entered. He got their room number, and I arrived at the motel a few minutes later. We went to their door, knocked on it, and a client answered. I forced my way in, and I found her already naked in bed, and it looked like I interrupted something. When she saw me, she started yelling at me and the PI, and didn't even show remorse for what she had done. I took out my phone and recorded them, then told her not to step in at my house again. She came home that evening, but found some of her belongings scattered on the lawn. It was a big mess, and I didn't care what the neighbors would say. Surprisingly, she realized the impact of what she had done when she came home, and she begged me to let her in so that she could explain. I didn't let her in because I knew no explanation would justify her cheating. As for the recording, I sent it to her company and texted it to her family members. I wanted everyone to see the beast she was, and they did. She didn't want to leave my house, but when I threatened I would call the police, she left. Most of the neighbors recorded her as she banged on my door to beg me, which was embarrassing for her. The next day, her company did not waste time firing her, and she was told not to contact the client again. The company also stopped working with the client, and his reputation was ruined. Ultimately, she lost her job, and her reputation with family was ruined. We also divorced because I wanted nothing to do with her again. Funnily enough, she kept calling to beg, but it was over between us. Her family was also disappointed in her that they wanted nothing to do with her. It was a very painful experience, and I have moved on, but I've not remarried. I'm unsure I will, but let's see how life goes. OP, It was obvious that your ex-wife had no respect for you and must have been using you too. It's sad you were blinded with love and couldn't see through her pretense. You did a great thing by exposing her because a woman like that would cheat on you repeatedly. You've shown great strength by moving on. There's no point in being stuck in the past. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Now, let's move on to the next story of the day. My girlfriend and I were in a relationship for 2 years, and we loved each other so much. For the record, this is my first time sharing my story here. I have been an active follower for a while, and I didn't think a moment like this would come in my life. Being in a relationship with my ex-girlfriend was sweet, and I enjoyed every bit of our relationship while it lasted. She was everything I wanted in a woman. She was respectful and never raised her voice at me in an argument or hit me. Yes, we fought a lot, but I never allowed her to leave the house angrily because I understood how bad things could get if she left. We would always settle it out and then make things up to each other. She was hardworking and beautiful, and I thought I could trust her. For someone who had just been out of a toxic and disrespectful relationship, I believed it was such a relief to end up with someone like my ex-girlfriend, but in the end, I was disappointed. Things were fine between us, and we were still two lovebirds who could not do without each other until the 2nd year of our relationship. A year and some months after we started dating, her father fell ill, but it wasn't serious. It was a roller coaster because he would get well one week, and the following week he would fall ill again. We were worried, and we supported him whether financially or emotionally. Also, my ex-girlfriend's older brother lived in the same town with their dad, while their younger sister, who was still in high school, lived in the same house with their dad, and they were the ones looking after him. My ex-girlfriend never had a reason to go home. We used to send money and talk to her father on the phone, and that was all. A couple of weeks after our 2nd dating anniversary, I noticed that my ex-girlfriend was beginning to change. First, our conversation dropped. She used to return from work and tell me everything that happened during the day, but she just stopped. She would come home and would be on her phone the whole evening. From there, our intimacy reduced. She was always claiming she was tired or not in the mood. Then the most suspicious one was that she changed her phone password, so I couldn't access it. When I asked her about the phone password, she didn't give me a good reason for changing it. Around the same time, she told me she wanted to visit her father that weekend because she didn't think her older brother and younger sister were doing a great job, and I allowed her. I believed it would only be for that weekend, but it wasn't. It continued with other weekends, and she would get excited each time the weekend approached, which was odd for someone looking after an old, sick man. I also noticed that the clothes she took were some of her most beautiful and exposing gowns she only wore for me, and I suspected something was wrong. Funnily enough, every time I called her sick father to confirm if she was there, he would tell me she'd just left the house, which continued for weeks. Our relationship continued to grow cold, and the distance between us was evident. I knew she was always talking to someone on the phone, and whenever I asked her who it was, she would say she was talking to her best friend, which I never believed. When I couldn't take it anymore, I hired a PI to follow her to her hometown, and he followed her from the moment she left my house on a Friday evening. Her town was 40 to 45 minutes away from the city we lived in, so she got there before sunset. He also followed her the entire weekend, and what I discovered broke me completely. That night, she didn't go to her father's house like she claimed. She was sleeping at another man's house, and he was her high school sweetheart. I recognized him because she still had a high school group picture, with the both of them holding each other in it, and she talked about him a lot, especially how they'd broke up. I didn't think that after all the terrible things she said about him, she would still return to him. The following day, she went to her father's house, stayed for a while, left, and returned in the evening. I finally understood why she was always excited to go and stay with her sick father. It was just a cover to go and spend time with her high school sweetheart. He had returned to their hometown for something, and he thought it would be nice to see her again. I had seen videos and photos of them kissing in public, him holding her waist, and the both of them cuddling in a restaurant and feeding each other. I was devastated and heartbroken. I didn't think she could do that to me and throw away all the plans and everything we worked for. I was so angry that I moved her things out of the house and left them on the porch. I also changed the locks so she couldn't access the house with her keys. When she returned that Sunday, She was shocked to see her stuff outside. She knew something was wrong, but kept asking what she had done wrong like she was innocent. When I sent her the reason, she went on her knees and started to beg. She told me nothing happened between them and only wanted to spend the weekends with an old friend. Funnily enough, that was their last weekend together because he was leaving the country, but I didn't care. I didn't let her enter the house, and she eventually packed her things and left. I was very hurt, and I'm still hurt. She tried coming back many times and didn't stop blowing my phone, but that was the end of the road for us. It's been 2 years, and I still can't get over everything. She damaged what was left of my heart, and I hope I can heal again. There's no need to hurt or cry over spilled milk. Your ex-girlfriend did not deserve you. She thought she could eat her cake and have it. You did the best thing by getting rid of her. She's terrible for your life, and you don't need ungrateful or unfaithful people. I hope you get over this soon. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact. When my wife and I met, I immediately thought she was the most beautiful person I've ever seen. She was lively and vivacious, and she was completely captivating. I knew from the moment I laid eyes on her that I wanted her to be my wife. I asked her out and she said yes. We dated for a few weeks and I asked him to be my girlfriend. It was only a few months after that she moved into my house, and a few months after that we were married. It all happened very fast, and a lot of people in my life warned me against it. I have an incredible job, and I make 6 figures a year plus bonuses that I get every quarter. I'm not the wealthiest person on the planet, but a quick Google search will show my net worth. That made dating hard. It was always difficult to see who wanted me for me, and who wanted me for what I could do for them. When I started dating my wife, she didn't seem like she wanted anything from me. She always offered to split the bill when we went out. She got me little gifts every now and then when she could afford it. She never wanted me to buy her expensive things or take her out on fancy excursions. It seemed like she genuinely enjoyed my company. Of course, I wanted to treat her to those things. If there was ever any person that I thought deserved it, it was her. I knew that she worked hard to make the money that she had, and I wanted to take that burden away from her. When we got married, I told her to quit her job. I made more than enough to provide for both of us, and I thought she could focus on creative pursuits that she was more inclined to do. She resisted at first, but eventually she agreed that it would be good for her. I know now that her resistance and refusal of gifts were all a ploy. I was manipulated from the beginning of the relationship to think she was something that she wasn't. She wanted me for my money, but she played it differently than all the other girls. Every month on the first Saturday, she would be completely unavailable to go on any dates or come visit me. It was like that from the start of our relationship. I asked her about what she did, and she told me that was the time she dedicated to visiting her mother. Her mother passed away when she was very young. She told me that she had gone to visit her grave every month since she was 8 years old to update her mother on her life. I thought it was sweet, and I never questioned it. Who would lie about something like that? I worked a lot, so unfortunately, I wasn't always home with her. I was usually gone by the time she woke up, and I came home around 7 or 8 p.m. usually. Whenever I was home, there was nothing suspicious happening. She was a very manipulative person, so she made sure she appeared to be the perfect, loving wife that I thought she was. She went to visit her mother one day, and I went on with my day as if everything was normal. I got a call from her in the late afternoon, so I answered the phone, but it wasn't her on the other end. It was the hostess at a restaurant in Manhattan. Apparently, my wife left her phone behind, and the woman was calling to try and get it back to her. She told me that her mother's grave was in Long Island, where she was from. She hadn't mentioned anything about going to Manhattan that day, so I was a little curious. The one on the phone asked me if I was the person that was there with her. She was hoping I could tell her to go get the phone. I told her to keep it behind the counter, and I would be going to get it. I had no idea who she was with. She heard a man's voice, and assumed that I was the person dining with her at the restaurant. My wife hadn't mentioned anything about going to Manhattan, and especially not going to Manhattan to see a man. I ended up taking off work early and going to the restaurant that the phone was at. I picked it up and looked through it while I took a cab home. I knew her passcode, but I had never looked through her phone before. I felt like a major invasion of privacy, but given everything that I just learned, I felt like I needed to. I looked through it, and I found a conversation with a number saved in her phone as Penny. From everything else I saw, I knew that the name was fake. There were a lot of explicit pictures being sent back and forth, and it was definitely a man she was texting. There were messages that went back for years between them. Through the context of everything, it seemed like my wife had been dating this man and fallen in love with him. Unfortunately for her, he was broke. That's why she broke up with him. She wanted a certain lifestyle, and he couldn't provide it for her. Regardless of how she felt about him, she needed to make sure she was provided for. Even though they broke up, they still saw each other once a month and slept together. It was like an agreement of sorts that they had. The man asked about me in the messages too. He asked her if I was pleasing her and if she thought about him while she was with me. She told him that she thought about him all the time, even when she was sleeping with me. My wife asked him about a woman that we'll call Lee. He told her that Lee was nothing compared to her. It was clear that they were both cheating on their partners. They had feelings for each other, and because my wife ended the relationship, he tried to move on with someone else but couldn't. My wife lied to me and told me she was visiting the grave of her dead mother to cheat on me with this guy. It was honestly unbelievable. She wasn't at home when I arrived, so I tried to prepare myself for when she got back. I sent myself as many screenshots of their conversations as I could because I was going to need them to divorce her. She wanted my money, and I wasn't going to let her have any of it. When she got home, I could tell that she seemed exhausted. She looked disheveled, and I could tell that she was just out cheating on me. It was just something you could see on her. She was surprised to see me home, and I told her that I got a call from the woman at the restaurant, and I showed her the phone. Her face fell immediately. I had no doubt she assumed I looked through it. I asked who she was at the restaurant with, giving her a chance to at least tell the truth before I broke the news to her. She told me that it was an old friend that she used to model for when he was painting. She said that he wanted her to be in a portrait. She threw on a fake smile while she lied to me and tried to stick with what she was saying. I guess she thought I was just that clueless. I told her that I knew everything about the guy she was seeing. I told her that I knew about Lee and how they were both having affairs, and I told her that I knew that she was only with me because of my money. She tried to tell me that none of that was true, and that I was wrong about what I interpreted from the messages. There was no interpretation. It was written out in front of me, and I read it for what it was. I gave her a week to get her things out of the house, and I told her that we would be getting a divorce. When it came to the divorce, she thought that she was going to take me for half of everything I had. I remember sitting down with her and our divorce attorneys while she gave me a smug look. She thought she won. We signed a prenuptial agreement, yes. According to that, if we ended the marriage, she would be entitled to assets. Unfortunately for her, she cheated on me, so the prenuptial agreement was voided. She didn't get a dime from me. She had no money in savings and no job. I kicked her out of the house, and she was forced to go live with her father. I almost didn't want to tell Lee about their affair, because I figured they would likely break up, and that could give my wife somewhere to go. However, I decided it was the right thing to do. I found out who she was, and I reached out to her and explained everything, showing her some of the screenshots that I had. She was completely shocked. She reached out to me a couple of weeks after I told her everything and thanked me. She hadn't even considered her boyfriend would cheat on her, and they were getting to a very serious stage in the relationship. She was glad somebody showed her his true colors before she made that big step. I've been wary of people's intentions with me for a very long time. Unfortunately, I feel like I've been manipulated in this past relationship, and I am somewhat closed off to them now. Honestly, I would have rather dated somebody who was upfront about their motives from the beginning, rather than somebody who lied to me and made me believe they were someone else. OP, it definitely seems like your wife knew what she was doing when she met you, and she created her personality to manipulate you. Unfortunately, and this isn't something you should feel bad about, it worked. You had no idea who she was before you met her, and she could make herself up to be anything she wanted. Lying about visiting your dead mother to have an affair is sick. I don't know what her situation is with that, but that's taking it a little too far. It's also just another example of how far she was willing to go to get what she wanted. I think it's funny how she thought she was still going to be entitled to a large payout from you after cheating on you. I think that really shows exactly what she was there for, and it's a shame. It seems like you really cared about her, and wanted to give her the best things you possibly could, and she never had her heart in it. Now for our next story. My girlfriend and I had been together for 6 years. I loved her and I wanted to be with her for the rest of my life, but apparently she had different feelings about that. Neither my girlfriend nor I went to college after high school, so we spent a lot of time trying to work to make ends meet. When we weren't working, we were spending time in town at local bars and restaurants. Our dream was to open a restaurant and bar for ourselves. We talked about it all the time, and we were hoping to get a business plan in order so we could try to get started. After a couple of years of planning and dreaming, we finally had a bit of a breakthrough in it. My uncle passed away and left me a large house. He didn't have any children or many other relatives, but he did know that I was hoping to open my own business. He hoped I could sell the house and invest the money in my bar. Some of my family members advised me against going into business with my girlfriend because we weren't married, but I didn't listen to them. I trusted her and I thought that she and I were going to be together for the rest of our lives. I wanted to marry her, but I wanted to make sure I could give her the perfect wedding that she'd always dreamed of. That meant having the business up and running. The only thing that I did too was make sure she wasn't on as a business partner. She was listed as an employee, so God forbid anything happened, I had an out. The thing is, I didn't tell her that. She was under the impression that we were equal partners in the business, and I knew telling her otherwise would hurt her feelings. We started working on everything, and within a year we were preparing to open for the first night. My girlfriend was in charge of hiring the staff, and I told her to give me the rundown when she was done. After she came to me with the resumes and information from the people that she hired, I looked over everything. We hired talented cooks, experienced servers and hosts, and for the most part, the bartenders were skilled. However, there was one that didn't have any bartending experience. His name was Eric, and his only work experience was at an office supply store. I questioned her about it, wondering why she would hire them over another applicant who had experience. If she liked him and wanted to give him a job, why wouldn't she hire him as a host or server? Training somebody in either of those roles would be much easier than bartending. She didn't really have a good reason for hiring Eric. She told me that she had a gut feeling about him after they were talking about drinks. She told me that I just needed to trust her, because she already hired him, and they couldn't undo it. I had too much other stuff to worry about to focus on why she hired him. A couple of weeks before opening, all of the staff came in to train and sign their contracts. I met Eric for the first time when I introduced myself to him. He was a good-looking guy. With his lack of experience, part of me assumed that that was why my girlfriend hired him. I thought it was pretty annoying. When we got back to our house later that night, I mentioned it and she got angry with me for even suggesting that. We dropped it so there wasn't an argument and we both went to bed. Over the next couple of weeks, I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off. I had so much to do and there wasn't enough time to do it. I wanted our opening to be completely flawless and it felt like my girlfriend wasn't putting in the effort that I was. Instead of helping me with all of the last-minute things that had come up, she was focusing on training Eric at the bar. At the heart of our business, we were a bar. We needed bartenders who knew what they were doing and weren't relying on a week and a half of training and a cocktail recipe book. I had to go visit a supplier one afternoon, and when I got back, my girlfriend was behind the bar with Eric and they were laughing and standing very close to each other. It almost looked like Eric was groping her when I walked in. I asked what was so funny, and when I approached, I could tell they were a little bit drunk. I had a realization then that my girlfriend didn't have as much stake in the business as I did, so she didn't care as much. I had a conversation with her later that night and I told her that I needed her to step up with work. She tried to tell me that she was working hard training Eric, and then I brought up how uncomfortable I was with their relationship. It looked like it was crossing some lines and I told her that I didn't like it. I already felt like she hired Eric because he was good looking and seeing them so close together bothered me. She told me that I was controlling when I said that. I was kind of flabbergasted that she would accuse me of that when any sane person seeing the way they acted together would feel the same. If the shoe was on the other foot and I was acting like that with one of the cute servers she hired, she wouldn't let me hear the end of it. I didn't want to focus on arguing with her so close to the opening because it would only distract me. Opening night came, and for the most part it was a huge success. We advertised the business and a bunch of people came in, and it seemed like they enjoyed themselves. The only issue that we had was Eric being horrible at his job. Over the next several weeks, the business was doing very well, and I thought that if it kept up the way that it was, we would be seeing profits in no time. With everyone busy at work, my girlfriend and Eric seemed to be spending less time with each other. I was glad to see that. I was in my office one Friday afternoon, and one of the cooks knocked on the door and closed it behind him. I'd assumed that he was about to quit. Instead, he told me about a rumor that had been going around about my wife and Eric sleeping with each other. I could tell he was nervous about bringing that information to me because his job might have been on the line, but he felt like it was the right thing to do, so he did, which I appreciated. I figured that the rumor might have just been people looking at their relationship and thinking the same things I did, but something told me that maybe there was something more to it. I hadn't seen them together often since the restaurant opened, but that didn't mean they weren't hiding something. I didn't confront my girlfriend about it right away. Instead, I pretended like I didn't know anything about the rumor, and I watched her. Now that I wasn't busy with the opening of the restaurant, I had time to pay attention to things like that. Over the week that I started watching her, I noticed that she was absent quite a bit. There would be periods of time when I would be home and she wouldn't be there. She would show up at the bar about an hour after I expected her. On top of that, she and Eric didn't talk to each other at work. However, I did see them glancing over at each other often. All of that together was enough to make me think that something was going on. We had a no-phone policy on the floor, and I knew that my girlfriend usually left her phone in her bag while she was working at the bar. So I went into her locker one evening while she was supervising the front of the house. It didn't take me long to find the evidence that I needed to prove that she was having an affair with Eric. I found videos of the two of them together and countless text messages. It seemed like their affair started while she was training him at the bar. From what I could gather, they had sex in the bar. Because she was my girlfriend, but also technically my employee, I was in a sticky situation. I wanted to break up with her, and I wanted to fire her. Eric was as good as done at the business too. But I couldn't behave in any way that would risk me getting in trouble, not with the business so new. From what I saw on the phone, it looked like they were fooling around on the property from time to time. I figured the only thing I could do was catch them in the act, and I could fire them both then. We had security cameras at the bar, so I started monitoring them regularly. The first instance I saw of them together, I recorded it on the cameras. They both went into the walk-in freezer, and my girlfriend performed oral sex on Eric. That was sufficient evidence for me to fire them. I called them into my office the next day, and I showed them the video. They were completely silent while they watched it. When it was done, I told them both that they were fired. Eric nodded his head and apologized for sleeping with my girlfriend and left the office. My girlfriend lingered behind and told me that I wasn't able to fire her because of her position in the business. I pointed out the truth. I had been advised against working with her as a business partner by my family, and I took that advice. She was an employee of mine, and I was firing her. She had no monetary investment in the business, and she was paid bi-weekly just like every other employee. I also pointed out that if she paid any attention to the business at any point while I was building it from the ground up, she might have noticed that. She told me she was going to have a lawyer evaluate everything, but I didn't care. I just wanted her out of my business. After they were both fired, I thanked the cook who told me about their relationship and informed everybody else about the change in management. They asked me about what happened, and I didn't hold back the truth. I told them about finding the footage of my girlfriend and Eric in the walk-in. My girlfriend never ended up getting a lawyer. She probably couldn't afford to get one if she wanted to. After I fired her, she had to practically beg for her old job back, and now she's working paycheck to paycheck again. Eric wasn't really interested in her aside for her being a quick hookup every now and then. Eric had the audacity to put my name on his resume to give him a reference for another job. They called me, and I told them the truth about everything, advising them not to hire him. I always thought he was kind of an idiot, but that was just too much. I'm focusing my attention on the business now. It's been doing very well, and there is the demand in my town to open up other places, so I'm trying to look toward the future. Your girlfriend threw around the term controlling because she knew it would make you back down. Nobody wants to be told that they are a controlling partner. Honestly, she manipulated you. The fact that they were so blatant with their relationship that there was a rumor going around your employees shows a complete lack of care from both of them. It didn't seem like your girlfriend cared much if you found out about the fling. She thought she was grandfathered into a cut-shy position. She was selfish and she wanted to hook up with Eric. That was all there was to it. I think it is funny that Eric didn't really want anything to do with her after the fact. She threw away a relationship with a good person and a stable job for something that was just a temporary excitement. She dreamed of opening her own bar with you and she had that opportunity. She threw it away and she got upset about it when it didn't work out. On top of that, it really sounds like she wasn't putting any work in. Your family did you a service by advising you to cover yourself with her. Had you not, things could have been a lot stickier than they were. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact. I, 34 male, met my wife, 33 female, 10 years ago at a small art gallery in the city. My best friend, let's call him Oliver, was an artist and he was showing a piece there. My wife was there with one of her friends and I approached her as soon as I saw her. I thought she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen and I had to be with her. My wife's friend, let's call her Mia, actually ended up going home with Oliver that night. Somehow Oliver and I ended up marrying best friends. We thought it was funny, but it was really perfect for all four of us. We went on double dates together all the time. We took trips together and we even planned vacations together. The four of us were practically inseparable. My wife was a librarian, so she didn't have much opportunity to travel for work. However, I worked in advertising and I traveled often to film commercials. We were used to my schedule for the most part. Oliver and Mia both worked from home on a business that I ran together online. So when I was gone, I knew that my wife spent a lot of time with Oliver and Mia. I didn't mind it at all. I was glad that she had somebody there to keep her company. During one of the work trips that I had planned, my computer had an issue with the screen, so I sent it to Geek Squad to have it repaired. While I was gone, I took my wife's computer since she rarely used it at home anyway. I got to my hotel room when my plane landed and went to use the computer to check some emails and get some work done. You can always tell when somebody clears a history on something. My wife didn't use the computer a lot, but I knew that she used it. There should have been histories of Christmas gifts she was planning on buying, bookstores, and her personal email accounts. However, the history was completely blank. I was a little curious about why she cleared the history before giving me the computer. Granted, it was her personal computer and she probably looked things up that she didn't want me to know about. If the shoe were on the other foot, I would have cleared my history before giving my computer to my wife. I didn't give it too much thought after that because I didn't think that my wife would do anything sketchy. However, moments later, I accidentally logged into her email using the saved information that she had instead of using my own. It sounds convenient, but it genuinely was an accident. I was so used to using my credentials that way that I just pressed OK without giving it a second thought. I went to log out of it right away when I realized, but then I saw an email exchange between my wife and Oliver. The message in the inbox was the most recent one out of a 280 email chain. I knew that they were friends. All four of us were. I had no idea that they were having private conversations with each other. Struck me as very odd. I clicked on it to see what it was and I was completely broken by what I found. They were having an affair with each other. They were sending each other explicit videos and images through email and planning the times when they would be able to get together. I didn't read through all the messages, but I did look at some of the first ones that they sent to try and figure out when it started. The affair had been going on for 2 years. Anytime I was away from home, Oliver and my wife took that opportunity to be together. They slept together even when I wasn't on a working trip. There were times when my wife would sneak Oliver into the library after it was closed and have sex with him when nobody else was in the building. Early on, there were some emails about possibly bringing me and Mia in on the situation and swinging. It was Oliver who suggested it, but my wife immediately told him that I wouldn't be okay with it. She was right to think that. Oliver thought that Mia might have been convincible, stating that he thought she would be gullible enough to just do what he wanted. I thought that was a horrible thing to say. I ended up converting all of those emails into a PDF and keeping that for myself. I marked the most recent message as unread and logged out to make it seem like I had no idea what was happening. I was going to be away for 3 days working and I had to focus on what I was doing or I could risk losing my job. It was absolute torture trying to pretend like nothing was happening when it felt like my entire world was shattering. I had the PDF and I needed to figure out the best way to utilize it. My wife and best friend had both betrayed me and I wanted to get back at them and make them regret ever crossing me. I mulled over what I could do when I returned and it finally hit me. It was the middle of summer and it wasn't anything out of the ordinary to invite Oliver and Mia over for a barbecue and some drinks. I suggested it for the weekend when I got back and my wife was all for it. They showed up on that Saturday and everything was normal. While we were eating, I brought up to everyone the possibility that we trade partners for the night. It was a joke. I had no intention of doing that, but I just wanted to see their reactions. Mia was appalled by what I suggested, but noticeably my wife and Oliver weren't that shocked. Oliver's lack of reaction actually upset Mia quite a bit. My wife pulled me aside and asked me about why I suggested that, but I just went back to the table and I told Oliver that it was his idea after all. I quoted what he said in the email and mentioned that he thought that Mia would be gullible and would go for it. She was very confused, so I handed her a couple of pages of the email highlights that I printed out. She read over them and from the context she figured out what was happening very quickly. She immediately started screaming at my wife and Oliver about what they did. She was hysterical and upset about everything and I didn't blame her. I felt the same way when I first found out. Oliver tried to punch me in the face. He accused me of ruining his life. I didn't fight him as much as I wanted to take my anger out on him. I knew that it would only lead to more drama. My wife tried to explain what was happening to me, but nothing she said helped her. Basically, she said that she and Oliver had always been attracted to each other, and after a while they couldn't take it anymore. They ended up sleeping together. She told me that she didn't think monogamy was for her either, which would have been nice to know before I was married to her for 6 years. Mia and I both ended up divorcing them and pretty much taking everything from them in the divorce. They said that they were attracted to each other, but after everything happened, they didn't even try to be together. Oliver desperately tried to get back with Mia because he said that it was a mistake and she almost gave in to be with him. I was able to talk her out of it. I sent the information about my wife sleeping with Oliver in the library to her boss and she was fired. Now she lives in a studio apartment in the city. She's reached out to me several times apologizing and suggesting that we give it another try. I think she's realized just how good she had it with me and regrets her choices now. I'm in a good place now after all of this and I don't want to look back at any of it. I'm finally ready to put myself back out there and move on from it completely. I can't even imagine finding out that the two people you should have trusted most in the world have betrayed you while you're away from them and have to pretend like nothing happened. It must have been unbearable for you to go through that. It definitely sounds like Oliver wasn't a good guy by any means. Saying that he could manipulate his wife into doing something even if she didn't want to do it is very creepy. It's a really good thing that you convinced her not to get back together with him when he tried. She likely would have been very unhappy with him after everything anyway. I always think using the excuse of not wanting to be in a monogamous relationship after cheating is ridiculous. If you feel that you might be polyamorous, then you need to discuss that with your partner before you cheat on them. If it comes down to it, you might not be compatible and that's okay. Cheating is never an option. It sounds like she was just using that as an excuse to make it seem like she was more sympathetic. Anyways, let's now get into our second story for my 28 male, fiancé 26 female, and I met at a bookstore about 3 years ago. She was working there at the time and I was going to pick up some new books. She was stocking the shelves and I saw her and thought she was cute. I asked her for some help looking for a particular book and we walked off together. We started talking and I asked her for her number and things took off from there. I proposed to her about 2 years into the relationship. I knew from the moment that we met that she was something special. I knew I wanted to be with her and I saw a future with her. Our relationship was great from the start, except for a few issues that we had to work through based on her past relationship. Her ex-boyfriend, who we'll call Ben, was her first serious relationship. They were together for 7 years and throughout the entirety of it, he was cheating on her and treating her like garbage. She was single for about a year before we met. During that time, she said she did a lot of self-discovery and healed from the relationship, though it didn't always seem like that to me. I never gave her any reason to suspect that I was cheating on her, and I treated her like a queen. The only issue that ever came up was when she started to feel insecure about herself. The relationship she had with Ben put a toll on her, and there were times when she thought that she wasn't good enough to be with someone like me. Ben was a sleaze. He couldn't hold down a job. He was sleeping with anybody that would pay him any attention, and he berated her for the smallest things. I didn't do any of that. I had a great job. She was the only woman for me, and I made sure she knew how wonderful I thought she was. I would treat her with respect, and she wasn't used to it. I knew she had a lot of trauma from that relationship, and I did everything in my power to help her get through it. But I could only do so much. It was on her to take care of her trauma and recover from it. As much as I loved her, it didn't seem like she was willing to take those steps. I hate even saying it because it sounds so insensitive, but it's the truth. I suggested that she go to therapy or see a counselor, but she would tell me that she couldn't afford it. I even offered to pay for it, and she didn't want to do that. All I could do was hope the situation would get better over time. I worked a regular 9-to-5 job in the office, and she was working at the bookstore. Her hours were less regular than mine. Some days she would go in around 10 a.m. and some days she would go in around 2 p.m. I was always at work when she was leaving, regardless of the time, but I always picked her up afterward because she didn't have a car. Because she took public transportation, we shared our locations on our iPhones, so I could always make sure she was safe. It's not something I normally would have done in a relationship, but she had several run-ins with creepy passengers on buses, and it made her nervous. I also like having that peace of mind. Around the holidays, with Black Friday coming up, she was picking up a lot of extra hours preparing for Black Friday sales. Part of that included optional late-night hours that allowed her to prepare new displays and unpack the large quantities of inventory the store received before the sales. When she did that, I didn't see her for dinner or anything like that. I offered to pick her up when she was off her shifts, but she told me that she didn't want to disturb me, so she just planned on taking Uber. I didn't want her to get into some strange man's car in the middle of the night and have something happen, so I stayed up for her regardless. I told her that was the plan, but she insisted on me not picking her up because she didn't want to bother me. The first night that she was gone, I checked her location around 11 o'clock when she was supposed to be clocking out, and I saw that she was at the bookstore. I could see the location updating every few minutes. When I checked it to show was in a car on her way home. Everything looked good, so I was less worried. One week, she told me that she was only scheduled to work late 3 days. But on Thursday, she told me that she would be working late again. I wasn't immediately suspicious about that because it seemed like a normal enough thing. I figured maybe another coworker called out or decided they didn't want the extra hours after all. That night, I did what I always did when she worked late. I was up and around the time she was supposed to be coming home. I looked at her location. Only that time she wasn't at work. She was at Ben's house. Right away, I was wondering what she was doing there. Surely, if she had to go over to his house for anything, she would have told me about it. It feels silly to admit it, but I didn't even think that an affair was possible. It never would have crossed my mind that she would be cheating on me with him. I waited for the location to change for about half an hour, and it didn't. It wasn't moving at all. I felt weird looking at her location without her knowing. So I waited about 10 more minutes until she would normally be home, and I called her. She didn't answer. After that, I started to worry. She never ignored my calls or messages. I knew that Ben didn't have her best interests in mind whatsoever. From what she described, he was never violent with her, but he didn't want her to leave him. I ran through countless different scenarios in my head about what could have been happening. None of them involved her cheating on me. After the location had it moved and she didn't answer my calls, I decided I was going to go see for myself what was happening. I drove over to the house and saw a car in the driveway, so I assumed that Ben was still there. When I checked my fiancée's location, she was still inside the house. I approached the front door, but before I could get there, I heard music coming from the other side. It was the type of music you would have on a sex playlist. It was then that I realized nothing nefarious was happening, and she could have willingly gone there to have an affair. I was frozen for a moment. I didn't know exactly what to do. I had a pretty good idea about what was happening in the house, but I figured if I knocked they could play it off as something that it wasn't. I ended up going back to my house and waiting there. My fiancée didn't come home for about another 45 minutes after I got back. I just rolled over and pretended to sleep while she got ready for bed. I asked her about work the following morning and she told me that it was fine. She even made up a story about some drama that happened. She was lying to my face. She also told me that the late night hours were going to be extended for a couple more weeks. I figured that she was lying about that too. She was preemptively covering for the time she was going to be spending with her ex. That same night, she ended up going back over to her ex's house again. I knew it was happening and I was already preparing to break off the engagement. However, I didn't want to just calmly break it off. I wanted to get some kind of revenge against her. I thought about it for about a week when she was visiting him instead of working and I came up with something. We were going to be hosting a Friendsgiving dinner at our house and I figured there was no better time to tell everybody about her affair than then. I almost considered not doing it then because I didn't want to ruin the mood, but toward the end of the meal, I stood up to make a toast. Everybody thought I was going to toast a friendship and my loving fiancé, but I ended the engagement right there. My fiancé was shocked when I made the announcement. I think she thought it was a joke at first, but it definitely wasn't. I elaborated by explaining that I knew she was going over to her ex-boyfriend's house. My fiancé tried to defend it, but she couldn't come up with a good excuse. I just told her that the engagement was off and that she could go stay with Ben if she wanted to be with him so badly. After that, she ran off to the bedroom to go and hide away from everybody because she was humiliated. Everybody else packed their things and left shortly after. When they were all gone, she came back out and yelled at me for humiliating her in front of all of our friends. She told me that she was sleeping with him again and that was all that it was. She tried to make it seem like because there was nothing emotional involved and wasn't an affair. I didn't believe that there weren't emotions involved. They were together for a long time and she stayed with him through a lot of stuff. She had to have had serious feelings for him to put up with as much as she did. I told her that I wanted her to get out of my house and I gave her a week to gather all of her things and leave. She did end up going back to Ben. I think they're still together, but he definitely hasn't changed his ways, so she must be miserable with him. All of the friends that were with us were definitely on my side. Some of them have tried to make excuses for her behavior by telling me that she might have been manipulated into getting back with him, but I still don't care what the reasoning behind it was. She cheated on me with a man who treated her like garbage, and I just couldn't be with a cheater. OP, it sounds like you were a caring partner who was there for your fiancé. It sounds like she had a lot of trauma from the past relationship with Ben, and it is a shame that she couldn't find a way to move on from that so he wouldn't have any hold over her. I don't know if you had a chance to look through any messages or anything like that, but I would guess that he was probably in her ear and manipulating her. However, that doesn't excuse the fact that she lied and cheated on you. It's sad that she would leave somebody who cared about her so much and treated her so well to be with somebody who would take advantage of her the way that Ben was. I think she must have had a very low view of herself, which is not good for anyone. When you suggested that she should go to therapy or counseling, you were completely correct in that. It sounds like she should consider going. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me.